The song brings tears in my eyes because I just lost my sister. And every breath we take, we can't take that for granted. So I'm not even going to pray. That song was our prayer. Just take that into account. Now, to bring up the mood, I'm going to bring up our student chaplain, Mollie Meyer, who I call Eminem because, you know, her initials are M and M. You got, all right, whatever. With a round of applause, please bring up Mollie.
So I would like to start this by being honest and just giving a disclaimer. This is the most honest and open I have ever been with an audience. So I'm just gonna ask that you be patient with me. And I'm delighted to be sharing this with you, and we can be doing it together. So it'll be a good time. So, with that being said, I have a question. Has anybody ever heard from passersby, from friends, from other family members, or anybody that you look or act exactly like one of your parents? I actually see this the most with my roommate, Corey. If you ever met her mother, you would see the exact same person with the exact same laugh and the exact same care for people. It's actually pretty interesting, you should see it. But the second most accurate has been in my own life. My entire life, I've been told that I am exactly like my dad. There he is. His name's Bill. You can say, hey, Bill. Yeah. Every time I brought a friend home from school when I was growing up, I would introduce them to my mom and they'd say, hi, hello. And then I would introduce them to my dad and they'd say, you guys are twins. We have the same face shape, the same big cheeks, the same snarky smile. We have the same sarcastic tone in our voices when we talk. And it doesn't stop at looks. We make the same jokes that nobody else finds funny, but we find ourselves funny, so we don't really care, and we're just the only ones that laugh. Thank you. We both get easily bored with life, so we have to drop off the face of the earth for a couple days just to prove to ourselves that we're not as boring as we think we are. We both use sarcasm in our daily lives so much that I don't think anybody who knows either of us really well thinks that we can have a sincere conversation all the way through. I could go on and on and on about the similarities between us. And I've been aware of them for as long as I can remember. I've never really minded it either. I've trusted my dad with more than I've trusted anybody in my life. He knows my complete story. He knows my memories and my dreams and my ambitions. He knows how I feel about God and about the universe. He knows who I like and do not like. He knows what I am afraid of. I have never kept anything from him. But that has not always been a mutual relationship. My dad has kept things from me. If I were to actually be honest about it, I would say that until my adult life, I didn't really know anything about him, except that I was a lot like him, and his name's Bill. Looking back, I can see why he did this. He kept a lot from me because as a little girl, I probably wouldn't have understood or grasped a lot of it. I think he thought that if he didn't talk about it, I wouldn't notice, but kids are pretty smart and very observant. So I did notice, and we just pretended like I couldn't. For instance, if I were to give you an example, when I was little, I would be drifting off to sleep, and then I would hear the back door creak open very slowly until finally just slamming into the back of the kitchen wall. And then I would hear trudging work boots at uneven paces going through the kitchen for an awkwardly long amount of time, until finally reaching the living room where there'd be a huge plop on the couch and snoring almost immediately. And even from my bedroom, I could smell the cigarettes and beer. He never knew that I noticed. My dad is an alcoholic. He has been struggling with his addiction for 26 years. It has greatly impacted who he is. It is a battle that he has fought by himself and kept from everyone for his entire life. And yet I feel connected to it. His first drink happened long before I was around, though. Long before I was born, long before the idea of me ever came into existence. This is where the story gets a little more complex, because these memories are not mine. This testimony is not mine. I wasn't there. I don't have any firsthand experience. And yet I feel deeply connected to what it is. So I'm going to borrow from my dad some memories that he had. So his first drink happened when he was in his teens. Like I said, both him and I hate to be boring, so whatever we can do to not be boring, we will do. So in his case, that meant going out with his friends past curfew and going to have a couple beers in a barn. He likes to think he was a country boy, but he grew up around Tacoma. This didn't mean a whole lot. I think a lot of us have experiences in high school where we test our boundaries like that, and it didn't really affect him very much at all. And he had dreams and he had ambitions. He was really excited to be going to college right after high school. He had got accepted, he had scholarships. His whole life was planned out for him. A couple months before he went, a lot of things happened, and his letter got revoked, not rejected. It got taken back. And he knew that in a couple months, all of his friends would be gone. He would be left with his family in the same town that he grew up in, and that was not exciting enough. That was not fulfilling enough. So without telling anybody in the family, he went and signed himself up for the Marine Corps. 2 weeks before departing, he told his parents, my grandparents, and in the blink of an eye, he was in boot camp, states away. And the only connection that he had from his entire childhood was alcohol. Nobody he knew went with him to boot camp. He was disconnected from his family, and he was very desperate to have something that he could say was a familiar face, and for him, alcohol was that. He made sure it was a close connection. He made sure that this wasn't something he would lose as well. And it would soon be the most sincere and important connection he would ever have, and it would soon possess him with its intimacy. And he would never be quite the same. We see something a little similar in Mark 5. Jesus meets a man who's been taken over by an intimate possession. From what, we're not exactly sure. This man ran up to Jesus from a cave that he was living in, screaming. This man was not someone that the other people in town had relationships with really at all. He kept to himself. He had his own demons to deal with. He was completely consumed and possessed by them. And these demons were pretty territorial. They liked having one-on-one interactions. They didn't like other people getting in the way. And like my dad, he was forced to live by himself in isolation, ostracized from human interaction, not strong enough to get himself out of it, and nobody on the outside strong enough to pull him out from the cave. So that's where he was. This is the kind of isolation my dad was in as well. And in his late 20s, it probably got worse, because by this age, he had 2 daughters, my sister and me. And while my sister lived with her mom and stepdad, my dad lived with me and my mom. And day after day, he would hear people telling him that his daughter looked exactly like him, that she acted exactly like him. And even as a toddler, I had that sarcastic wit that he did. I was born with it. You should believe it. From the outside, it looked really healthy. In reality, my dad was ostracized, as he had been for years at this point. His mind and his spirit lived in the cave. His deepest thoughts and feelings could only be known by the demons that he let in so long ago. But he kept up his appearances pretty well. He kept his drinking habits out of the house. He thought that if I didn't see it, then I wouldn't know. For the most part, that was pretty true. Instead of seeing a cave dweller, I saw a father for the most part. The only time I ever saw real distress on his face was when I was kicking his butt at a Yu-Gi-Oh game, or when I stole the last bowl of Captain Crunch. But as the years went on, it became harder and harder for him to hide it. A few beers here and there turned into entire bottles of liquor in one day. To say that I didn't smell it on his breath would be a lie. And yet, we went on pretending that we told each other everything, and there were no boundaries between us even so. When I was a freshman in high school, things shifted again. My dad lost his job. It was the economic crisis of 2008. Hundreds of people lost their jobs from that company, and he was left to stay at home. It's kind of hard to have two lives where you drink one place and then come home drunk another place when you don't have a place to drink anymore. So you have to do all of it in one space. Sometimes he would leave for days at a time just to try to keep up the facade, and he would come back days later, and he would smile at me, and I would smile at him, and he would look in the cupboard and see I once again ate all the Captain Crunch, and he would act like nothing happened. That's how high school went pretty much for us. He was no longer capable of keeping the addiction out of the house. There was no way of sustaining the two different lifestyles, and like the man living in the cave, he could not be chained away from it anymore. Because the man in the cave in Mark 5, people attempted to chain him up. He was dangerous to himself and to others because of what he was possessed by. But he would break the chains immediately, and he would go back to the cave exactly where he was. The relationship was too strong for anybody to intervene anymore. It was his battle. And that was where my dad was. If anybody in our family tried to pull him out of where he was going, he would pull right back. By the time I came to Warner, I actually had no idea where he was anymore. Drinking at home for hours on end led to him being out of the house for days on end, which led to him not living in the house at all anymore. He didn't have a job since 2008. I would go months without having any idea where he was, who he was with, what he was doing, what he was afraid of, what he wanted to do, what his ambitions were. And yet I would walk around this campus with his face and his cheeks and his eyes, and I would wonder to myself if my face is the only remnant left that will be of him soon. It was in this time of absence and separation that my dad's demons had to confront Jesus, just like the man in the cave had to confront Jesus in Mark 5. And we see this in 5:7. Exclaiming, "What do you want with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In God's name, don't torture me." And it's important to look at this because in this situation, the man from the cave is screaming. Some could say he was hysterical. He lived in a cave. And yet he's still claiming Jesus is Son of the Most High God. So there is no trust here. There is no happiness to see Jesus. There is no relationship, really. There's resentment, there is anger, there's sadness, and there is fear, but there is still faith of who he is and what he's capable of. Even if he doesn't really realize that that's what it is. That is what it is. In God's name, don't torture me. It would be naive to say that in God's name, don't torture me wasn't from the demon. In other words, it would be naive to say that it wasn't the demon who was saying that. They were saying, we know what you're capable of. We know that you could take us out. Don't. But it would also be equally naive to say that that wasn't the human saying that as well. I have been struggling with what has been possessing me for a long time, to the point where I've been ostracized from my family and I live in a cave because I was not born in this situation. I had a childhood, I had a family, and I had a life. It went different directions, and suddenly I am here by myself. Don't torture me any more than I have done to myself, because I know you're capable of that. When the man exclaimed this to Jesus in Mark 5, Jesus responded by casting out the demons. And within minutes, he was freed from what had held him captive and isolated for so long. In the Bible, he did this by taking the demons and putting them into a group of pigs, which then drowned themselves in a nearby river. I'm pretty sure that's not the way it went with my dad, but I'm not sure. I wasn't there when my dad called out to Jesus, but I know that it happened, because one day I got a call saying that he was in the ER. This was my junior year at Warner Pacific, which was around this time last year. And I heard he was there for kidney failure. According to who called me, apparently a couple days before, he had a dramatic change of heart that he or anybody else involved could not really explain. But what they did know is that he refused to go anywhere near alcohol. It repulsed him. It was almost like he was afraid of it. While his spirit may have been repulsed by what had kept him captive, his body wasn't really the same. And after 26 years of being dependent on a substance, it's kind of difficult to just take it out of your body and expect everything to be okay. That's why he ended up in the hospital. His kidney went into shock in his liver. 1 week after that phone call, I find myself sitting across from him in a restaurant in Southeast Portland. We don't talk much at this point. I just keep staring at him because he looks really different than he used to. He looks tired and worn down and pale. His body looks really weak and shaken. Behind his exhaustion, though, I see a brightness in his eyes that I haven't seen since I was a little girl. And that was as exhilarating as it was confusing. Sorry, I burped. And as we sat there in that restaurant, he stirred his iced tea, stared at the lemons that were right next to it, glanced at me from time to time when I threw wadded up napkins at his face, but for the most part, just stared out the window. We sat like that for most of the meal. Finally, he sat up in his seat and looked at me and told me that he was an alcoholic. And we both know that I already knew that. But when he said it out loud, he broke a barrier that had been between us since I came to this earth. I had trusted him with everything from day one, and it never stopped or ceased. And from this moment on, from this interaction, that was a mutual relationship. This was a connection that he had not had since he was a teenager, of full honesty with a person, not depending on a non-human substance for the honesty. I knew then that things were about to change dramatically in ways that I would not ever be able to picture. In Mark 5:18, it says, "As Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him. Jesus did not let him, but said, 'Go home to your own people and tell them how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you.' So the man went away and began to tell in the Decapolis, the 10 cities, how much Jesus had done for him, and all the people were amazed. Jesus freed my father from an addiction that had taken his life away from him. For his entire adult existence, alcohol isolated him from authentic living and fulfilling dreams. But it only took one desperate, loud, raw, disturbing cry to Jesus, not even a request for help, but just recognizing that he was capable of doing something that changed everything. And if you asked him what got him to where he is today, he would simply reply with, 'The good Lord.' And his answer is short and sweet, but there's power behind it. If he had time to sit with you, he would say, at my lowest point, when I wasn't living in a house, when I wasn't having relationships with anybody, when I made myself sick when I drank and sick when I didn't, when I didn't know when I was going to be living, for how long and for why, when I had no purpose, when I didn't know who I was anymore, I just let Jesus know I was upset and I was hurt and I was broken. And I just asked him not to torture me with this. That's what he means when he says the good Lord. It has been 11 months, almost 12, since my dad has been sober. It has been almost a year since he has had a drink. Now he's a sponsor for Alcoholics Anonymous, which means that he is the one people call when they don't know how to get help and they don't know who they have. And he's the one that sits with them and says, this is what you can have if you choose it. He's the one who sits out of the cave now. And he knows better than to go in and try to chain you up from the addictions that you have. And he knows better than to go in and say, you should just get over it. And he knows better than to try to bring in people from the town and say, just drag him out. He knows he just needs to wait until the people come out by themselves, and then he directs them to where the healing power is. And he makes sure that they are vulnerable enough to say, I know who you are, Jesus, and I know that you are capable of making it worse, but I also know that you are capable of making it better. He wastes no time in telling his testimony to others and helping them heal from it. He knows the power that is in it, even if a lot of the time this power can only be summed up in a few, 3 short, simple words: the good Lord. He knows that using this power and utilizing it in his narrative and his memories is changing lives the way Jesus would like him to. And in this way, he is amazing the people in his town as well. And as for me at this stage in my life, I cannot tell my story without telling his. My development is embedded deeply in his darkest days. And the ministry that I believe in wholeheartedly is completely embedded in his sober days. We laugh at the same things, and we look like the same person, and we minister from the same story. And we use the same narrative for Jesus' healing. I am just thanking God that Jesus brought the man from the cave back home. And I have hope that other cave dwellers can do the same. And that is the mission that we are left with. We all know a cave dweller in one way or another. And I am sorry that they cannot be changed from what they know, but they can have someone waiting for them outside of the cave. And my dad tried really hard to teach me patience growing up, and that's just one thing we're never going to be alike with. But at the same time, it's the waiting outside of the cave that shows that relationships outside of a substance are real and they're authentic, and they can happen after 26 years and longer. So today I just want to end simply with saying, Jesus, thank you for hearing the fear and the sadness. Thank you for seeing the destruction that happened. Thank you for hearing someone say, I can't do this anymore, and thank you for responding with it. And thank you for bringing him home.
Thanks for being vulnerable. That was dope. That was really dope. 26 years of an addiction is broken. Like, how dope is that? Right? Play them keys, Mike. Lord, we just thank you for today, God. Thank you for the vulnerability that people come up here and express, and we just show how liberating it is to come to you, God. Every day that we live, there's something that we're all dealing with. There's something that we witness that other people are dealing with. Help us to be patient. Help us to be the people that wait outside the cave. Help us to cry out when we're the ones that's chained up and acting all crazy, right? Help us to go for it, changed and marinated in the words that she has spoken. We give you glory, we give you honor, we give you praise in Jesus' name. You are dismissed. Hey, wait. I love you. Okay, bye.